Well, we had a little informal satsang yesterday and discussed some of the subjects with the flooding in the foothills of mountains and how these things can be caused. And I thought, and you spontaneously read this morning Daya's letter concerning the subject. And I thought that I would share a few thoughts on the subject as well. As soon as they come to me. The world, well, the subject of today is natural disaster, karma, and death. And with the recent flooding, it brings to mind that life presents us with challenges sometimes that we don't expect. And yet I would question, why don't we expect them? For example, if you live by a river, you know that every river will flood larger than it's ever flooded before, and yet you choose to live there. If you live at the ocean, you know that every ocean will come in farther than it's ever come in before at some point, and yet you choose to live there. And then, when it does so, that you could predict that it would do so, you call it a disaster. And then you call it nature's fury, nature's anger. Nature isn't angry. Nature is quite detached. Nature sees the circle of life, death, rebirth, as a natural progression. It's our view of what's going on in this world that causes us to suffer, not what's actually taking place. And I'd like to talk a little bit about why this might be so. And in order to understand it, we've got to go back to how the creation is made. We have to understand that the world that we live in is made in such a way as to encourage us to do this, to encourage us to feel good or bad about things that really are neither good nor bad. We have to go back to how was the creation made. Infinite Spirit, in its pure state of Satchidananda, is uncreated. It's beyond the creation. It's unmanifest. And it's void. There's nothing outward. It's pure consciousness. Consciousness of bliss. In that infinite consciousness, there is the potential for manifestation. But just as there is a day of Brahma in which the creation is manifested, there is also a night of Brahma in which the creation is not manifested, equally long. But when the creation is manifested from that calm, infinite state of bliss, duality is created. The nature of the world is that as soon as and what is the first thing? What is the first building block of the creation? Thought. As Yogananda described in Autobiography of a Yogi, the causal worlds are the first to be created. The causal worlds are only thought. And then further out from unmanifested spirit, the next level is the astral world, which is light and energy. And only then, further out, is the material world, the physical plane that we live in. So underneath the world that we live in, and all of the perceptions that we have, is thought, energy and thought, consciousness. So now, we find our consciousness tied to the ego. The ego, the personality, the soul tied to the body, is in a state of fluctuation. We like this, we don't like that. We feel good about this, we feel bad about that. And we give values like nature's fury. A storm is bad, a pleasant day with a cool breeze is good. But why is this good and that bad? It's only relative to our self-interest. I don't want my house washed away by the river. I want my house on the river. I'm willing to break the rules in order to have my house on the river. I desire this, and then when nature in its natural fluctuation causes change to take place, I'm upset. And of course, the greatest change that we don't want to take place is death. We don't want to die. We have the instinct for quote-unquote self-preservation. But what self are we trying to preserve? Our true self, the soul, is undestroyable. It is a part of the ocean of spirit. It's only the body that can be destroyed. It's only the body, and in fact the body is not actually destroyed. It's transformed into another form. Unless you put it in a box and try to, and isn't this the ultimate delusion, is save that body in a sealed box for who knows how long. What? In case you're going to need it? The Indian way, the what?
The Hindu way.
Yeah, the Hindu way of burning the body, of releasing it to continue those molecules. It's an interesting thing. Studies have been done. I don't know why this is so feedbacky today. It sounds ringing to me. Studies have been done that the physical body of Jesus Christ, as it returned back into the earth and the ecosystem of planet Earth, it's been determined that through that process of returning into the ecosystem, some of the molecules that were in the physical body of Jesus Christ are in each and every one of us. Molecules that were in the body of Jesus Christ are in these bodies. But these bodies are not one solid thing. They're a bunch of small particles that have been drawn together. Why have they been drawn together? Because of an electromagnetic pattern. And that pattern is the manifestation of our karma. Our karma has drawn us to this body in this time, in this world. Some of us, Dia mentioned, we chose to come here. Some of us choose to come here, some of us don't. Our karma draws us into circumstances according to our level of consciousness, our ability to make choices. The higher we are, the more free will we have, the greater the number of choices that we can make. But when we have not attained a consciousness of free will and actively used it, then we're drawn into circumstances beyond our control. So we are all drawn into this world at this time. It's our karma to be here. But we all have individualized karma too. So if the planet were to explode, then you could say it was all of our karma to be exploded. But on a smaller level, you realize that when there is a disaster, like what we're currently referring to in the foothills, not everybody dies. Only some people die. Why do some people die and some people live? Because of their karma. It could be that their karma was to pass at that time because of something that they had done in a previous life. But it also could be that their karma, it wasn't so much that their karma was to die, it was that their karma wasn't strong enough to live. We can be swept up in larger streams of consciousness. And this happens on planet Earth. You know, we have the community of our body and mind, but then we have the community, the physical community that we live in, our neighborhood, our city, our state, our country, the world, the universe. Universes explode. When the sun of a system explodes, all of the planets in that system probably vaporize. Maybe not all the time, I don't really know. But the point is that we're affected by things that are bigger than just our own small universe of karma. So, we don't want to die. Our karma may, why don't we want to die? Because we think that death is the cessation of all life. But when we recognize that there is no such thing as the cessation of consciousness, and when we, through meditation, attune ourselves to that truth on ever deeper levels, then we can achieve what we call even-mindedness. We can begin to detach ourselves from it and recognize that the soul is not killable. As Krishna says in the Gita to Arjuna, who dies? Krishna didn't want to kill anybody. But Arjuna didn't want to kill anybody. But Krishna says, who dies? They go from this scene in the play to another scene in the play. One of the reasons we don't want to die is because, in particular, because if you're a devotee, if you have come into this life and come into the positive circumstance of spiritual opportunity, you want to take advantage of that opportunity. But if you're just a worldly person, if your only interest is in outward phenomena, it doesn't really matter, except that you have attachments. So mainly we have attachments, well, I was going to say, mainly we have attachments to family, but that's not really always the case. Some people have attachments more to their jobs, to their reputation, meaning their fame, or the power that they have over others. A lot of people are attached to their vision of what they want, and if somebody upsets that, they don't like it. Now, we do have what we call the instinct for self-preservation, as I was saying before, but that self that we seek to preserve is the ego. The ego that we're trying to save, the body, the ego, the personality, that's what we're trying to save. The soul doesn't need saving, it's saved. It can't die, it's eternal. But the ego feels threatened. The good news to the ego is that the ego doesn't get destroyed when you move on. The coat, the costume that you wear might be destroyed. You'll no longer be in the body that you have now. But you will get a new body. And it will continue to be determined by the qualities of consciousness that you have. And in that same way, the qualities of consciousness that determine this body determine nature as we see it in this world. So natural disasters are not phenomena of accident. They're expressions of consciousness. Everything in life is an expression of consciousness, thought, energy, material manifestation. So Yogananda said that things like extreme weather and war and famine, all of these greater world or larger scale phenomena are caused by consciousness. And it's the consciousness of the people on the planet that create an energetic momentum that causes these things to happen. And we can see, just on a physical plane level, that if you build homes in a place that's likely to have problems from nature, in America, we have what we call Tornado Alley in the Midwest. And this is an area, a fairly large area, that there are tornadoes there. Every year. Every year there are tornadoes. And yet some people build homes that are not going to withstand it. And they talk about creating safe rooms, where they'll build one safe place. Used to be a storm cellar under the ground. But whatever but some people don't even do that. They don't even, do that, and yet they're surprised when the tornado comes and the homes are destroyed and the people are killed. And then you blame nature and say, it's nature's fury. Why should nature be that way? Because nature is positive and negative, yin and yang, calm and storm. These two sides of the coin must go side by side. And if they didn't, if the weather was always nice, if there was never a bump in the road, if the food was always perfect, if there was never any bugs, no mosquitoes, well, that would be good. Then what would life be like? It wouldn't be the motivating schoolroom that it is. The purpose for this world, our purpose in this world, is to be motivated for spiritual growth, to be motivated to come back to our origin in infinite bliss of spirit. That's our only purpose in this world. We become distracted by our involvement, but that involvement is not the goal. The goal is to use that involvement in its various forms to transcend this world, to see past this world. So it's the most natural thing in a caring person to be concerned when these things happen. And to do, if you become aware of something in life, anything, then you have to do something about it. If you're aware of it, by the very nature that you've become aware of it, you have a responsibility to do something about it. But then you have to think, well, what can I do? What is my role? Because in the case of this disaster, it's not everybody's role to go running up to the mountains and to try to pick people up off the mountain. We don't have that capability. You might donate money to a charity who can send food, and you can do anything you can think of. But the most important underneath thing that you can do is send positive energy. Everybody can send positive energy. Everybody can act as a channel for the light and the love of spirit to bless those no matter what transition, what circumstance they may be in. Some people go into storms for fun. When the wind blows on the ocean, it makes waves. And the bigger the wind, the bigger the waves. And there's people who actually are constantly looking for the big waves, and they go out and they ride these 6-story high tall waves in the ocean. When everybody else is running away from the ocean, they're going out to have fun. Those waves are not mean. They're not angry. They're not negative. The storm, this Himalayan tsunami, is not negative. It's neutral. It's what do we do with this? What do we learn from this? How do we grow our hearts and our lives and our caring? Every experience in life is what we make of it. We get to choose. And if our loved ones pass, do we look at that situation and say, I'm angry with God for taking my loved one? Or do we think about it and say, well, let's see, God has taken my loved one, hopefully if they are an open-hearted, caring person, to another world in which they can experience their loving and caring on a higher level. Why should I feel bad for them? I might feel bad for myself and say, well, I'm going to miss them. But who is missing who? If we were able to perceive our true reality, we'd realize that we are in them just as much as we are in this body. Our spirit is omnipresent. The truth of our reality is that we are everything. And this consciousness of separateness causes us to suffer in a variety of ways, but it is a delusion. It is not the truth. We have been hypnotized. And when people become hypnotized, they will do crazy things. I remember when I was only 13 and I went to one of these dinner theaters and they had a magician. And the magician had 10 or 12 people come up and he hypnotized them. And they all, after they were hypnotized, were just sitting there normally. But then he would snap his fingers, and suddenly they'd all start acting like the character that he had suggested that they be. One was a chicken, and one was a dog, and another one was a wolf howling at the moon, you know. They were hypnotized, and they reacted to the stimulus that he had suggested to their minds. This whole world that we live in has been suggested to our minds that we should be pleased with some things and upset with others. We have been hypnotized. And if we want to unhypnotize ourselves, we must go within. And this is the purpose of the practices of yoga. To go within and become unhypnotized. As Patanjali said, Smriti, to remember our divine reality. So, act as a channel to bless every circumstance in life, but don't let those circumstances determine your happiness. Don't let the world tell you that it is the reality. Grow your personal experience of the divine reality, and then through the practices of Kriya Yoga, as the Master said, you could stand unshaken amidst crashing worlds. Namaste.